Good evening, everybody. Welcome. As Mark said, this is the follow-on to Mark's excellent presentation, which covered off the history and the background and the kind of pre-planning and preparation that went into it. What we're trying to do tonight is kind of cover off a bit more of the practicalities of what actually happened on the expedition, with a little bit of pre-activity, just to give you an idea of what was involved in the whole undertaking. So, as we said, there was a lot of work that Mark covered on Wednesday night, which was the huge amount of work that Mark did to get all of the people involved, and I'll go through some of those in a minute. From a club perspective, we also did a fair bit of pre-work, not least from a kind of collecting the right equipment perspective, getting all the relevant bits and pieces together, but we also took the key people from our club and a few of the other participants on some recce dives to get us used to working in murky water, task-loaded activity. This particular example is we had a day in Salford Quays, where we'd previously put a training platform, and we took our boat along. As you can see, Granada reports the news crew came along as well, and we did a lift of a boat that's in the bottom of Salford Quays, and just got a few of our people kind of used to the way that these things should work. So that was prior to going to Scotland. You know, it wasn't just let's load up and go. There was a heck of a lot of pre-work involved, which helped make the Scotland diving trouble-free. As difficult as it was, I think everybody felt they were prepared for it. So that was a little bit of pre-work, and obviously Mark and I managed to get ourselves on the telly even before we started, which was kind of interesting. So what we ended up with was a huge amount of equipment. This is East Cheshire Sub-Aqua Club's own clubhouse, purpose-built in 1990, 3-bay boathouse, compressor and all sorts of other exciting gear. Obviously we had to kind of take it on the road, and we hired a big trailer. We got two, what you can see on the back of this particular trailer is two IBC bulk carriers, which we cut the lids off, which was in expectation of our success of coming back with the bombs in, which mercifully we did. We ended up with two compressors, a petrol compressor, gas blending equipment, helium, oxygen, spare cylinders, ropes, every bit of kit we could have imagined. We kind of thought through all the scenarios, from doing all the lifting ourselves with several large lift bags. We took cargo nets because we were trying to work out how to get, if we lifted the things to the surface, once they were there, how would we get them onto a trailer? I think mercifully for the place that we hired this trailer from, we didn't actually need to immerse the trailer in the lake and let the tide go out and see the bombs land on it. Thankfully, they probably wouldn't have been too happy about that. They weren't happy, as it happened, with the rust that fell off the bombs and stained the trailer, but that's a whole different story. But I'm sure they'd have been less happy if we'd dunked it in log striven for half an hour. Anyway, so lots and lots of preparation and kit, and we are lucky in East Cheshire. We had quite a bit already, but in prepping for this, we purchased quite a lot of additional stuff, which obviously now remains with the club. So let's just cover off before we start then what actually we were trying to achieve. Obviously there was a very specific objective of find the bombs, get the bombs, but what we wanted to do was actually come away with something other than just rock up, dive, find a bomb, get it onto the surface. It wasn't quite as straightforward as that. There was a very specific set of things we wanted to do. Mapping the debris field, we knew there was more than one in there. So rather than just find one and lift that, we wanted to know where they all were as much as possible. We wanted to look at both the deep and the shallow target sites, and I will explain a little bit more about that in a minute. But it transpired the deep site, A, was too deep, but also was extremely silty, such that the side scan told us it wasn't worth diving it. And in fact, we didn't really go anywhere near the sort of 60+ meter site. It wouldn't have been worthwhile. And as it was, we found so many bombs in the 28 to 35 meter range that we were spoiled for choice. We also wanted to look for evidence of other things in there. We'd heard there was potentially a midget submarine base in there, and obviously midget submarine operations were certainly happening there, so we wanted to look for that. And the objective, the big one, was to locate and raise 2 highball bombs with eager and awaiting museums ready to receive them, but so we'll come on to that as well. We also had to transport and preserve the bombs, so you can't just lift these things out and stick them on a trailer and hope they last, because very quickly they'll disintegrate. So there was a whole piece of how to store them, hence why we used the water tanks, and then a set of chemicals we needed to use to kind of slowly desalinate the metal, and so we'll come on to that as well in a little bit. And the other thing we wanted to do was have a bit of fun, and to be fair, some of our guys spared no time in doing exactly that. This was the method of getting the tanks out to the support vessel, so they spared no time in having a bit of fun with that. We had a lot of people involved as well, not only from the Royal Naval Divers, but there'd been a lot of discussion through the MOD, getting permissions, as Mark discussed, and we actually had, over the course of the week, different commercial companies coming, free of charge, giving their own time, but they needed directing. I mean, we were in charge of operations. We were the ones that were telling them what we needed from them. And to be fair, they were absolutely fantastic in doing exactly what we needed, and in some cases going somewhat beyond, but I'll give you a view of that a little later. We had to assemble a team of divers, the actual sharp end from a club perspective, or from a BSAC point of view. The dive team came from 5 different clubs, and a real mix of skills, and I think Mark managed to amass people with a vast amount of experience, and each person brought particular skills to the table, and we ended up with a team that was really capable of pretty well anything. We could if we had chosen to dived into the deepest parts of this lot. We've got helium and mixed gas divers and rebreather divers, but we chose from a practical standpoint and from a safety point of view we decided not to do that, not least because, to be fair, we found all the things we needed to in the fairly, relatively accessible recreational depths, which made it much safer to do. So a great team of people, and I think everybody contributed, to the success of this. But our 2 club boats in the background, and just on the left, you can see a little jetty, which is kind of where we had a dive base, highball control, where we radioed instructions to the various people out on the lock to tell them what we needed from them on a particular day. So going through the teams, the Navy team, this is the team of divers. They're surface-fed divers, so they were obviously on umbilicals. They are the Northern Diving Group, part of the group coming out of the naval base at Faslane. So they basically steamed round from there in their dive boat, and they managed to bring with them this SD Moorfowl, which is a surface support vessel with a 12-ton crane attached to it, which made life really hugely easier. We didn't have to do any airbag lifts or anything of that sort. We will explain a little later just how we did it, but basically once we tagged the bombs and got them attached to something that could be hoisted, we were able to lift them directly off the seabed straight onto that boat and into the IBCs, which made life a huge amount easier and a lot safer too, thankfully. The other companies that were involved, GSC Rentals provided a brand spanking new sort of £60,000 to £80,000 side scan sonar towfish, and Aspect Surveys provided a really good survey platform in their boat, and we had to basically bolt a winch to the back of that boat. There's no way this could have been done from a rib. There was a lot of technology. There was a computer attached to it. The winch was controlling the depth and flying height of the towfish, and I'll cover a bit more of that a little later, but a really high cost operation. That particular boat is well beyond the means of any project we'd normally run as a club, so we were very grateful for their involvement. As you can see, also just something that we had to contend with, wrapped around the towfish, you can see a whole load jellyfish, and actually as the week progressed, the jellyfish seemed to get worse and worse. 1 or 2 divers did get stung, but not too badly. But everybody was wearing gloves on the boat to avoid themselves getting stung. The other people involved with it was a chap who ran a remotely operated vehicle, a tethered ROV, and you'll see some footage from that a little later. But again, we had all the tools at our disposal, and we just had to decide where to deploy them and what to ask them to do, which is kind of what comes to this. So what happened was we knew that various teams were going to arrive on certain days. We arrived on the Saturday, having travelled over, and diving operations began on the Sunday. Royal Navy arrived Monday afternoon, and we had to give them something to do. So there was a set of activity that was planned, quite a lot of detailed planning. Dive teams were identified and tasked with particular, like the Jack Stay search, which we'll come on to. And we obviously gave the ROV guy a brief on where we wanted him to go and look for things. And there was a set of activity set out for the whole week. That said, we had to kind of be flexible given what we found each day. So the idea was that we'd collect data, we'd kind of return to dive base in the evening, we'd kind of have a debrief on how things had gone from a diving point of view, and we'd pour over the information that we'd gathered and take the views of the team as to what then to focus on the following day. We also then had to decide what to do in terms of tasking each of the various people, both the side scan sonar, the ROV team, and the Navy guys, in terms of what we wanted them to do the following day. So quite a complicated set of activity, but I think, as I say, everybody contributed, and we had a fairly good plan, as you can see, and I think it went pretty well as we expected it would. Some people were very keen to get stuck in. This is Fred. He just launched the boats, and he wanted to get out on the loch. This is Saturday night, but we had to hold him back. There was plenty to do, so we decided it was better to wait and go with the plan. This is us putting the boats in. What we did was launch the boats once, left them out moored on the loch. We had both of our club boats there, which, as you can see, are 6-metre ribs. I think this is the only slipway within reasonable distance of Striven. This is actually at Glen Striven at the top here of the loch. Loch itself is about 10 miles long, and as you can see here, the road stops just below Knockdown, then goes into the Glen Striven estate, which is roads, but they're all private roads. So putting the boat in at Glen Striven allowed us not to have to travel across from Largs or from Cumbria or anywhere else. And obviously we then had lodgings on the Glen Striven estate, which made life a lot easier. As Mark mentioned on Wednesday, Loch Striven was kind of a remote area. You can see on the pictures on the right, really, there's not much there. Certainly at the top end of the loch, it's just countryside, beautiful place. But we had to take absolutely everything that we needed. I said the accommodations were very pleasant and we were well looked after, but you weren't going to just pop to a shop. We had to make sure everything was where, we were self-sufficient for the week. So this is a picture taken from some of the materials which documented the testing itself. You can see here in the middle, this is a mosquito coming down the loch, and this is the first position that we knew they'd been doing tests on, and this is just opposite somewhere called Finart Point. Now, we know from the bathymetry and everything else we've got that this is deep. This is 70 metres deep here, and we didn't really want to go anywhere near that if we could help it. We intended to side scan it and have a look what there was there, but it transpired that that wasn't a great place. And if that's the only place they'd done their testing, this would have been incredibly difficult. However, mercifully, they decided that they, when they were doing the testing, couldn't get down to that depth to check the bombs that had hit the target. So they moved the boat further up the loch. You can see they'd moved it past Finart Point, further up towards Glen Striven, and brought it inshore into an area which is in 30 to 40 metre depth range, which meant their divers could go and actually inspect the bombs and report back to Barnes-Wallis the condition of the bombs after they'd hit the target, and obviously made our job a heck of a lot easier too. So there's a set then of expected target areas for our side scan activity, and we focused most, if not all, of our efforts on the second target location because of the depth. Although we did side scan the lower one, the deeper one, we found that there wasn't a great deal protruding above the silt, whereas we saw very quickly evidence of lots of eyeballs in the shallower area. And this is, as you can see, Finart Point here, and we've got a side charge and the main debris field log. This is on Google Maps. I think these are now flags which are left on Google Maps with the appropriate GPS coordinates, but obviously it's been largely published now, so you don't need to go and check it on there. But that's where all of the action is. This is dive base. As I mentioned, there was this nice little jetty, although nowhere near strong enough for us to land a highball on. And there's no way of getting a car down it either, or indeed a pallet truck. So that was definitely not an option for getting the highballs ashore. But great place. We had a number of bits of accommodation in close proximity. And it was a very good place because it was a short run up to the main operations area, which is Finart Point here. This was where most of the action was in terms of the highballs. And this is the support ship just moored out waiting for instructions as and when we lifted the bombs. But a great place to be. Early part of the week, the weather was fabulous, but it deteriorated as the week progressed. More jellyfish, higher winds, and worse viz. Usual British diving, basically. So, oops, going the wrong way, excuse me. So, the jackstay search was the first thing that happened, started on the Sunday. We built our own jackstay, part of the planning activity. We got all of the ropes and the buoys and the weights and everything else, but Mark very kindly tasked me, basically said, there's a pile of rope and some lumps of lead, go and make a jackstay. So this was what we did in the week, was preparing all of this, and I think it worked pretty well. Standard configuration, 2 weighted lines with buoys at either end, and then a line suspended off the bottom, a search line which was used as the datum for the searches, and each pass along this line, if anything of interest was found, a DSMB would be sent to the surface. The boat would log the GPS coordinates of that DSMB, and then the DSMB would be taken back down to the bottom. They continue and move the jackstay line along the bottom of the lock, and covered quite a decent area over the course of the Sunday. And that worked really well. This is footage from the ROV to give you an idea of the visibility or not, especially after the ROV has kicked it up. So this is the jackstay working perfectly, keeping the line off the bottom, and Mark gently instructing the ROV operator to try and stay away. So this is divers with brilliant buoyancy asking the ROV not to kick the silt up, which, as you can see, he didn't listen to at all. So this was the problem with the bottom of the lock. It literally, you get anywhere near it, and in no time it's zero viz. So that was one of the challenges, and they did a great job with the jackstay search. They found quite a lot of targets, which we logged, and we obviously were then to use that as the premise for what we did the following day and go back and investigate. The really big detailed information we got, of course, was from the side scan survey. So, as I said, this was a fabulous bit of kit, really high end. At the time, it was state of the art. You know, it would just arrived from the US, high frequency, high fidelity. The guys that were operating it were professionals. They did a lot of work for the oil and gas industry, and they said they'd never seen anything like it in terms of the quality and the definition they got off it. And we got first use of it, so we were very impressed. Towed behind the boat, the Vigilance from Aspect Surveys, and as I suspect most people know, that it basically using sonar to map the bottom, and it sends us, so the towfish is, there's a layoff, which is the length of the cable from the back of the boat. Then the towfish will be a certain amount, certain depth above the bottom, and it'll send, the closer the bottom, the better, in the more clarity you get on the signal, but the more danger you have of running into something. So with £80,000 worth of side scan towfish, they were a little careful on getting too close to the bottom, but they did a very good job nonetheless. And the software will then be able to triangulate the information that comes back from the towfish, the length of the cable that's out from the winch, and the height of the fish above the bottom of the lake, plus the depth of the towfish in the water. Triangulates all of that information to give you really detailed GPS coordinates for every feature that you pick up on the survey, and you'll see the quality of that was amazing. So the guys that did it, Tim Pennington, the guy in the seat there, was really expert on this stuff. We had the people from Klein Systems with us, as well as the survey company, and did a fantastic job and covered probably about a kilometre length and half a kilometre width of the loch in incredible detail. We also did an additional survey of the deeper area, which we were finding the towfish was having difficulty finding the bottom. It was that silty. It was having trouble basically pinging a signal off the bottom of the loch. And they said to us it would be extremely fine, extremely squishy silt. So hence why we decided it wasn't going to be a great idea to dive into 60, 70 meters of water with that to greet you at the bottom. So we gave that one a miss. The results they got, so this is a kind of screen grab of it in action as we were passing over the main debris field, and every one of those little tiny blobs is a 1 meter across highball. You can see bottom right shows you the path the boat's taken, and that kind of builds up a mosaic picture, slice by slice. And the top right is a set of a zoom in, if you like, of the main picture. And the little shadows you can see. So these highballs will be on the left-hand side of the left-hand screen. The black line down the middle of that left-hand panel is where the towfish is passing over the bottom, and it's blind to that bit. But what it does is it sends a signal out sideways, and it casts effectively a shadow. And in measuring the length of those shadows, you can work out exactly how high off the bottom a particular feature is. Literally like shining a torch in the dark, you can see a shadow will be able to show you how high something is off the bottom. So we were able to measure each of these anomalies, each of these highballs, and we could tell from the measurements that it was the right size, 1 meter across. It also told us the height above the silt, which meant we were targeting highballs that sat prouder of the bottom in terms of our targets for recovery. So we were able, using that, to identify not only the depth of things that we were looking to be recovering, but also how proud of the bottom it was, which made life a lot easier. So trying to pull out, you can imagine the suction of something that weighs 900 kilos with all the concretion on it. The suction of that, if it's more than halfway in the silt, is nearly impossible to shift. But we found some that were sat quite proud of the bottom, which meant it was much easier to get them free. But the side scan was fabulous. You can see here there's a line at the middle, which is, or the lighter line on the right, which is the anchor chain. At the end of that, with a long shadow on it, is the Bruce anchor that we found. Again, all the little blobs, the smaller ones, are all highballs going from right to left, is going from shallower to deeper. And then the little white thing on the right-hand side, the lighter coloured sort of rectangle, is a midget submarine side charge. So we managed to find in this one piece, and I guess this is looking at about, I would guess this is probably 300 or 400 meters from top to bottom in length. In that one area, we found everything you could want to find. I mean, this is, this was undeniably the mother lode from our point of view. As I say, this is how we managed to characterize it all. And the chain is huge, and the anchor's worth a dive on its own, but then you've got all the highballs and the side charge, and you can do all of that in one dive. Really well worth a visit. And this is give you some idea of the scale of the anchor. It's enormous. Not actually contemporary to the highballs. We found out it's a Bruce anchor, which wasn't invented until 1974. We believe this anchor belonged to a container ship, but nonetheless interesting and quite a feature to start or end your dive with. And the anchor chain as well, huge. Somebody must have been very upset when they lost that off the ship for whatever reason they lost it. I think somebody would have been in bother about that. So as you can see, lots and lots to see down there. And this is the side charge as we just seen it. And in fact, if you look at this, there's a few interesting things here. This allows you, again, using the software to measure, gives us 8 meters length, 2.5 meters wide, and this was just over 0.5 meter sitting proud of the bottom. In this case, this is actually not the one that we saw on the previous scan, because that's in about 28 meters of water. Some of the data you can see on this screen tells us that the toefish was running at 37 meters when it was scanning this, and the toefish altitude, it was 16 meters off the bottom. So you're talking about 50 meters where this particular side charge is. So we found more than one of those. But when you can dive the other one in 28 meters, there's no point in going to see this one on its own with nothing else around it at 50 meters. But fantastic, bit of technology, and really interesting to see what was in there. We found a few other items. We found an Uncharted Wreck, as well as one that is on the charts. And this was when we were doing the deeper piece. You can see that this particular one here, 59 meters plus 8. So this is a 60 meter depth. And you can actually see the silt where this ship has sunk, and like they allege the Titanic did, kind of slipped along the bottom as it was landing. So it went down at speed, one assumes, and kind of slid along the bottom when it hit the bottom. This is a smaller boat. This is only, 30 meters long. That, again, is in 67 meters of water, but this wasn't on the charts. And again, we haven't dived that, but it's there with the GPS coordinates up here if anybody wants to go and give it a try. Lots and lots to look at. This particular one, I mean, this just gave an indication of the quality of this side scan. You can almost see the bolts on the bomb on the top of it. This is lying on its side like a bowling ball that's tipped over. And say that it was fantastic. In this case, you can see that the height above the silt, 0.8 meters. So it was sitting very proud, as you can see from the shadow. The shadow shows that it's proud of the bottom, and even the return of the sphere is definitely above the bottom. So that was one of our candidates for lifting, because it would have been easier to get at, and certainly the way the naval guys were trying to recover these, which was to build a scaffolding tower around it. Effectively, they needed to be able to get underneath, or at least in the narrower part of the widest circumference, in order to make the lift successful. But so this allowed us, without even getting wet, to decide on the relevant targets for the lift and direct operations. And this is a bit of a zoom in on that particular one. Absolutely fantastic. And again, you can see you've got latitude and longitude. We could go and you could drop a shot straight on that based on those coordinates. So, having done all of that work, these guys, the Navy divers, were tasked. This is their boat. You can see them, they're moored up, and they're actively in a dive operation there on some of the high balls we pointed them at. We had our guys diving at the same time. You'll see a blob here, DSMB, which was actually on the anchor. So we had divers down on the anchor chain and the anchor and further up, while the Navy divers were kind of concentrating on trying to get their scaffolding frame. And then the moorfowl was moored further up the lock, just to wait for instructions. And the challenge was to get some high balls on the surface by Wednesday, which was when they were ready to do the lift onto the deck. So this is the scene each evening. We had a number of houses on the estate, and it was a real fever pitch level of work, going through all the information that had come back in the day, poring over photographs, video, side scan information. The chap at the end is the chap with the ROV, so he would come back and report what he'd seen. And he'd found a number of high balls, but unfortunately, because his machine didn't have GPS on it, finding them again proved more than interesting. He did actually find a high ball reasonably close to the jetty that we'd used as dive base, which was a lot closer than the main debris trail. It must have missed its target and flown past, but we never did locate that one. But nonetheless, lots of work going on to try and decide where we're going to go next. All the equipment and the IBCs particularly were then, obviously we had to put these onto the main boat, and this is them craning those on. We floated them out behind one of our ribs, and then they lifted them onto the deck in readiness for the arrival of the highballs. So everybody was waiting with bated breath for that to happen. And this is just a few of the pictures of some of the diving activities that went on. Top left is the side charge, the midget submarine side charge, a couple of highballs, and the bottom right is the anchor chain. So we went and did quite a bit of diving to map, to collate information, just to kind of make sure we got our facts straight and validate GPS coordinates. We shotted the side charge so that we could make sure we could hit it again. And we've actually used that as the start point for the dive trail, which I will come on to. So again, this is kind of where we're at. The dives that I'm going to show you a video of a dive in a moment, which is basically in at the anchor, following the anchor chain past some highballs, and then zooming off to the side charge. It's a tricky navigational job to do this dive unless you've dived it a couple or three times. So the recommendation, as you'll see in a minute, is to dive the side charge first, because it's almost impossible to miss the chain. If you just head away from the side charge in the correct direction, so this map is north up, so if you head west from the side charge, you can't possibly miss the chain unless your navigation is shocking. But it's very easy to miss it if you try and dive it this way. But anyway, here's a short video of what this looks like, and an idea of some of the depths and distances involved. So we'd shotted the anchor so that we could find it, and because that was the end of the debris field, we could dive at this end without interfering with the naval guys and getting in their way. But this anchor is enormous. So if you head along the anchor chain, which is broadly south, you will, if the visibility is any more than 3 meters, eventually bump into a number of highballs. This is a dive where we're still at early days looking for them rather than knowing exactly where they are. But as you'll see, there's a dark shape, and it's like, ooh, what's that? And lo and behold, it's a highball. So I'd say you're probably 25 meters from the anchor, and you'll bump into the first one. As you can see, they're in remarkably good nick. All the bolts visible, the hydrostatic charge in the middle visible, and we took some notes, measurements, and documented as we went. Obviously making notes of where it was in relation to how many chain links it was from the anchor and things like this. These bombs in particular, I think, are about 32 meters. So you've got a limited amount of time. If you put a sort of 30% nitrox mix in, then you'll have a reasonable amount of time and not too much decompression. As you see now, we've basically bumped into a gaggle of them. So we've continued along the chain and now turned left, which is east from the chain. This one's got a huge dent in the back of it, so it obviously hit what it was aimed at. We managed to recover one with a dent and one which was pristine. And now continuing generally in, actually it's not west, it's east, my apologies, heading east from the chain, you come across that group, and then continuing east, there's sea pens on the bottom of the lock, not a lot else. There's quite a few langoustines knocking about, but then we happened upon what you can see again now in the gloom is the side charge, which is quite big. It's about the size of a sort of an estate car. Although we'd had free from explosive certificates for the highballs, we hadn't had a free from explosive certificate for the side charge, which, given how big it is, we decided to not try and bash it with a hammer or a knife and give it due deference, to say the least. But an interesting piece of kit nonetheless. Undeniably, that is a side charge. And it is possible to dive the dive trail that we describe in Scuba Magazine, which is online, it's on East Cheshire's website, you can download the details. To shot, because you can see this on a sounder quite easily, so you can shot the side charge, you can swim broadly west from the side charge, hit the chain, swim along the chain, see some high balls, and finish at the anchor, and use the anchor as your kind of ascent point, and that's a good dive. You'll get to see, all of the key features. You can also choose to do east, hit the anchor chain, and then go down into the debris field, but you're rapidly into sort of 50 meters plus. If you want to get all the way over to these, you're probably in 60 meters or more, which you're going to see everything you need to see in the relatively shallower water anyway. There was a detailed article and all the GPS coordinates in Scuba Magazine, and again, all of that information is on the East Cheshire website. I'll give you the link at the end. You can download all of this stuff from there. So this is the moment of truth. This is when the first highball emerged from the water. So what this is the one that the naval guys, the Navy dive team, recovered. And what you can see on it is their very elegantly engineered scaffolding frame with ratchet straps over it. The challenge or the problem is that, as you can see, this is kind of tilted on its side. The little square frame is supposed to be underneath the bomb. And what happened on more than one occasion is that as they lifted the bomb, it tilted like this, and the bomb fell off the frame. In this case, they were lucky in that the ratchet straps kind of held on, and they managed to recover it. But as a consequence, their method turned out to be quite time-consuming, and they successfully raised one, but then they ran out of dive time. They're on a very strict set of kind of dive operations tables with a certain amount of cumulative underwater time allowed, and they effectively ran out of time. But they were successful. They recovered this bomb, and on time, indeed, for the Wednesday. Well, I think this was Tuesday, actually, this one came up. So we had a lot of press and everything else descending us on Wednesday, so we were lucky enough to be able to show them that mission successful, at least in part at that point, which was really good. So having run out of time, the Navy guys then kind of said, well, we're done. We can't really put anybody else down, although obviously we put them on top of a number of highballs. They kind of passed the baton and said, over to you guys. If you want another one, we're keeping this one, they said. We're going to gift it to some great senior military person. But if you want the bomb, you're going to have to sort it out yourself. So we thought, that's great. What a challenge. We didn't fancy the frame idea just because of time taken to do it, and we're not scaffolders. So we had heard that fishermen had actually caught these bombs in their nets from time to time. And so as we had the cargo nets, we kind of, over a few beers one evening, we came up with the idea that we would put the cargo net around the bomb, tuck it under one side if we could find one that sat up far enough, and then effectively tuck those, the two loops on this side of the bomb through the two loops on the other side of the net, and then tie it to a long hawser and tie it to the boat and see if we couldn't scoop the bomb up, which turned out to be mildly inspired because it worked perfectly. The only concern was whether or not there was anything sharp on the bomb which might cut through the cargo net, but these were 3-ton cargo nets that we'd got, and as it happened, it worked flawlessly. It was absolutely brilliant. So this is one of the dives where we'd borrowed some of the heavy-duty gear from the naval guys, and we went off to locate and to capture our own bomb. And this is what you can see of the conditions of Dave, Kent, and myself trying to tie the cargo net in place. And this is the dive we actually went in to put that long hawser in. So we were right underneath the Navy boat. They'd lent us their gear, and they basically tied a long rope, as you can see, which we were going to use to then tie to the cargo net, this rope that's dangling from their boat at the moment. And they basically passes the rope. We have to go and switch the connection from that rope to a lifting rope. So So here we go. So what we had to do effectively was, you'll see this is like a strap with a connector on it, and we had to make sure then that we connected that to a rope which would allow the crane to pull the highball in the net up from the bottom. I'm not sure how this video is coming across, Mark. Are you? Can you give us a view?
It's fine. Yeah, it's fine.
Okay, good, good. So what effectively we're doing here is the bomb has been scooped into the net at this point, and we're following along the straps we use to scoop the bomb and into the murk, as you can see, has been stirred up on the bottom. So we're taking that very heavy rope with a massive shackle on it, and the shackle had to be passed through all 4 eyes of the cargo net in order that then it could be attached to the boat with the crane. And what we've done is made sure we pulled the bomb into slightly shallower water, so we're probably about 24 meters at this point, but more or less 1 meter visibility. So it's a question of finding the loops, some of which were kind of stuck underneath the bomb, so we had to kind of wriggle them out, put the shackle in position, and then retire to a distance and watch the bomb be hoisted out on the crane. But this was where the practice we put in beforehand came into its own. We're effectively operating in low vis. There's a fair element of task loading, and it's pretty heavy work. That shackle weighed a lot, so that you can see the kind of things we're having to do to make that happen. And this is the result: the shackle connected to the cargo net, and it wasn't lost on us that we'd managed to raise this perfectly, completely enclosed in the net without any shadow of doubt that it was ever going to fall out. So we thought we were all pretty clever at that point, and very happy we recovered a highball. I would say that was quite a moment. And this is the highball that we recovered in that clip on the boat. This particular one, as you can see down this left-hand side, had hit the target ship and was pretty well dented. But in terms of the mechanism and all of the gubbins on it, was in pretty good nick. And in fact, as you'll see when we took the concretion off, it was amazing, really, really good nick. This was the chap who kind of started it all off. Ian basically was the guy from Dundee who'd written the book about Barnes Wallis, and this was the first time he'd ever actually touched one of these bombs. He'd seen pictures, and he'd done all the work in terms of the historical record reviews and things to find out where they were. So he was pleased as punch, as you can imagine, when all this came to fruition and he got one that he could actually put his hand on. These are the Navy divers, and Mark had arranged for a little memento. As you can see, what he's presenting to them here is a little copper replica of the highball bouncing along the lake, and that was something which the project team gifted to the naval divers. And he was pretty chuffed, him and his guys. I think I think that's probably pride of place on some mess mantelpiece somewhere, I guess. As you can see, quite a nifty little bit of sculpture. So this is everybody, our team and the Navy divers with 2 highballs in the IBCs, kind of job done. Feeling very proud after what was a very exhausting, busy week, and feeling pretty good about it all. All dives done safely, no issues, no problems, and we kind of achieved pretty well everything that wanted to achieve while we were out there. The next job, however, was to get these things off that support ship and onto our trailer. So we looked at the map and thought, oh dear, we've got a 2-hour drive here. or across a ferry from Dunoon and driving round to the naval base at Clyde at Faslane. So we decided if we try and make it a little easier and see if we could fathom a way of getting the bombs off the boat somewhere somewhat closer. So as we've been tooting up and down the lock on our ribs, we noticed this, what looked like a very sturdy looking quayside, quite handy looking place with a bit of flat area for them to drop the bombs off on. And we did a bit of research. We decided to look, so what exactly is this thing? And as you do, we got on Google and we zoomed in, and you can see the little kind of the white bit there is the actual jetty itself. And then lo and behold, there's something interesting behind it. What it actually is a oil and gas pipeline agency fuel depot, which contained aviation fuel and diesel, marine diesel, about 300 million litres of fuel. So having done the research and found out it was an upper tier site under the control of, as you can see, the Major Accident Hazards Authority, Mark decided to task me with going to talk to them and have a conversation about whether, excuse me, would you mind if we dropped our bombs off on the end of your quayside? So duly ready for it, I decided to drive up there and have a chat. And it's obviously covered in barbed wire and all the signs and everything else, and security guard at the gate. So I approached this guy thinking I'm wasting my time here, and he sort of basically, excuse me, would you mind awfully if we put our bombs on the end of your quayside? And incredibly, he said, oh, you're the divers doing the bomb thing. I said, oh, yeah. He said, it's been all over the news. It's amazing. I'll just give my gaffer a ring and see what we can do. And he was really enthusiastic. And in no time at all, he came back and said, yeah, no problem. That's fine. He didn't even ask to see the free from explosives certificate. So as it happened, we then followed the ship up the lock, the support ship, the Morphal. They craned 2 of our bombs, and the pipes in the background here are fuel lines. So you can imagine, I don't know, nobody obviously filled in the appropriate forms for this because that would have been a nightmare, but they let us put our bombs on the end of their quay. They actually used their own stacker truck, and they were fantastic. They couldn't have been more helpful. We were allowed to bring our cars inside the fuel terminal. We brought all the trailers in and the boats and everything. And they used their stacker truck to load up the trailer with the bombs, and then we managed to secure everything ready for transport back. So we were kind of stunned. And everywhere you look, the signs, as you can see, no smoking, no naked flames. But interestingly, not one sign said no bombs. So I think we were okay with that. It still makes me smile to this day that we were allowed in there, but brilliant. You know, we had so much support from everybody. Everybody involved with the whole thing was just great from start to finish. Seen is the trip of the 2 bombs back to East Cheshire Sub-Aqua Club in Macclesfield. We unloaded one of the bombs, which we were going to do some of the restoration on, or at least the cleaning, etc. And this is literally the same weekend we returned from Loch Striven. We then drove the remaining bomb all the way down to St Albans to these guys, the de Havilland Museum, who obviously we'd arranged to deliver one of these bombs to. The de Havilland, of course, being the manufacturers of the mosquito. So these guys had got mosquitoes in the hangar at the back here. And to say they were keen to see these bombs was an understatement. They were really chuffed when we turned up. We
say can't be done. We've got a long ways to go, and a short time to get there. I'm eastbound just like a man.
So that was us handing over the bomb. I think that bomb's now been restored by those guys. We gave them a lot of the chemicals required. So we got kind of a reasonable amount. And they spent several months doing the desalination process and prepping it in order to put it on display in time for the Dam Busters anniversary, which was year before last, I think, yeah. The second bomb was going to go and complete the collection at Brooklands. So they've got every bomb that Barnes Wallis had ever produced, particularly the Upkeep bomb, which was the main dam buster bomb, but they hadn't got a highball. So obviously our job was to give them one. So what happened was they got in touch with the Mary Trust, the Mary Rose Trust, I beg your pardon. And the Mary Rose Trust did the restoration on their bomb. They did all of the prep work and spent, I think, over a year getting that bomb desalinated and ready for display. This is the bomb whilst it's being treated, and you can see it leaching out and a bit rusty, etc. But on the right is that bomb, which looks pretty pristine to me. It's in amazing condition. That arrived at the Brooklands Museum, and in the background you can see it's now taking pride of place next to the Upkeep bomb. As you can see, it's quite a lot smaller, and this is in the area within the museum where all the Barnes Wallis bombs are kept. So now it's fine. This is the day it's arrived. I don't think that they are displaying it on a pallet, to be fair. I think this is the day that it turned up and was delivered. I think it's displayed in a slightly more salubrious surroundings, but job done as far as we're concerned, and it's now there on display in perpetuity. So a job well done by everybody, I think. So that's kind of the end, or is it? So not quite. This is the project that kept on giving from our perspective, because not only has there been a kind of backstory to it, and obviously we've been able to give the bombs to the museums, and they continue to be part of a story which is ongoing. I think it enthused everybody who was involved so much, in particular the guys from Aspect Surveys. They came from quite a way up, I think Aberdeen. It's quite a trip. They decided to go back again to Lochstriven literally within weeks of the original trip. And they'd got an additional piece of new equipment they wanted to try. And this is a 3D bathymetry sonar, amazing piece of equipment. This is basically like a down scan that produces depth profiles. But when you plug all this data into the computer, you end up with something that looks like this. Now, you'll see this in a bit more detail in a second. The purple bits down the bottom left are going deeper. That's down to sort of 70 meters. You go through the blue bits, which are about 50, and into the green bits, which are in the 30 meter zone, and then up to 20 meters, 10 meters into the red. What this is an incredible map of the bottom of Lochstriven. And in fact, you can relate it to the original side scan data. You can see the anchor at the top, the chain running down, and all the little blobs are the bombs. This doesn't really come to life in 2 dimensions, but what we also found, by the way, was you could actually see, because they'd gone back after we'd finished, you could see the indentations on the seabed where the high balls had been lifted from. It was that good. It comes to life, though, when you see it in this case, in moving in 3 dimensions. So this is a piece of software which is available for download on the East Cheshire website. You can download all the data from the side scan and this, and it allows you effectively to fly through the seabed scan. It's kind of incredible, almost like diving it before you dive it. You can see the anchor chain here. You can see the anchor at the end of that chain, and all these little blobs of the high balls. You can see just to the right in the middle here, this is a high ball that's still next to the chain. That's the indentation from one of the high balls which was taken away, as indeed is that. So you can see they took high balls from quite close to the chain, but the 3 high balls that you saw on the dive video are these 3, and this is the side charge. So incredible bit of technology, and it just brings to life the dive site. So you can you can download the software, you can play with this, you can sort of fly through whichever way you want to, use the mouse to move it around as you see fit. It is incredible. I mean, really a huge kind of asset for us. What I would say is, go to East Cheshire's website, have a look at the data, the stories on there, there's some videos, a bit more information than you've seen in this, in terms of, there's like a documentary on there as well. And you can download all of this data totally free, including the software to drive the data as well. Lastly, we've also been back to Lochstriven twice as a club to take some of our broader club members on the dive that we've put on the dive trail. The other thing that we've done is done some photogrammetry on the Highball. So what this is the photogrammetry which we did over the course of the last 2 years. We had to take 2 trips to get this done. This is a 3-dimensional model, which again you can kind of do what you want to do with, in terms of, you can spin around, you can look inside it if you want to go, you can go inside, not that that's much interest, but it gives you a really good idea of this particular bomb has got quite a lot of concretion and quite a lot of marine life on it. But you can see this one wouldn't have been a candidate for lifting because it's pretty well halfway in the mud. It'll be almost impossible to get this out of the suction and the mud that it's in. This is another slightly different bomb. It's on its side, but this one, interestingly, you can see it's got a massive dent in the back of it. This is another one that hit its target. And in fact, in this case, it's actually split the casing. As you can see that the rust particles or rusticles, but like the Titanic, is starting to ooze out of the bomb. But nonetheless, what you can do with these models, other than just look at them online like this, which is interesting in itself, you can actually load these into a VR headset. And the idea is that the museums will load this underwater view into a VR headset, and you'll be able to walk around the bomb that's on display in the museum and actually then put the headset on and see it in its original state, sat on the bottom of Lochstriven as you walk around it, which is quite an eye-opener. So that is, in a nutshell, kind of what we got from the Highball, with a little bit of an update of new things that we've added to it over the last couple of years. I'd recommend going and visiting them. It's a piece of public sea. We've given all of the GPS coordinates, a detailed dive trail. We've even now, to make it easier, put a line in from the side charge to the group of 3 highballs and then to the chain, so you can actually find your own way. As long as you can find the side charge on the scanner, which is right under the GPS coordinates we've given out, you drop onto that and then your quid's in. You've got a good half an hour dive on the nitrox mix, and you'll see absolutely everything there is to see. And it's if you get a nice day and you get some reasonable visibility, it's a really great dive. Being that close to a bit of history is quite something. And that's it. Happy to take any questions. Thank you. Will sent me a private note saying if you can get your hands on a VR headset, that you can view it in Sketchfab. Indeed, you can. In fact, I think it's called Google Paper, which is like a cardboard box you slide your smartphone into. So literally for the price of I think you're talking 20 quid or something, you can actually look at that Highball bomb in 3 dimensions in virtual reality. So John says, let me have a look. He's putting a trip together up to the Highballs, staying at South Whittleburn Farm campsite logs and launching ribs from Inverkip Marine. Yes, that sounds like a good plan. In fact, I think it's about 13 kilometres from logs over to the, on a decent day, it's a lovely trip. Really picturesque ride over in the ribs. I can highly recommend it. You don't need to be, berthed in or putting in Lochstriven. It's very easy to drive over to Largs, which isn't that far from Glasgow, and put in. You can also, we use the lifeboat slipway at Largs, which is very, very accessible, really big open slipway. You can use that any state of the tide, and it was free, beyond a donation to the RNLI. So I'd highly recommend it. Yes, indeed. The other thing I would like to say, thank you, Cameron, is that Cameron Cromwell, a marvellous first-class diver, one of Mark's first-class diver colleagues, did all of the lighting for those amazing pictures. He was the guy that you saw suspended above the anchor. So he spent most of his week being a lighting man for Mark, so Mark could star on the front page of Scuba magazine. So he's one of the unsung heroes, is Mr. Cromwell. Thank you for that. Oh dear. If you go to East Cheshire's website, you will see here, it's exac.org.uk. On the front page of East Cheshire's website, there is a news section within which you'll find EXAC expeditions. In there, you'll find absolutely everything you ever wish to know about highballs. You can download all of the side scan data and the software to view it with. You can download all of the amazing 3D bathymetry and play about with flying past the highballs with that. There's, say, a number of films on there. There is details of the highball dive trail, all of the GPS coordinates you'll need to plan a trip. And if you wish, drop us an email. Always happily share our experience. If you need any guidance or just want a bit of a steer on planning a trip, then Mark or I or some of the dive managers at East Cheshire would be delighted to give you the inside line on it.